Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone. Paul Security Weekly.
I've got Baby Yoda all over me.
That's it. We got these. I brought some ice molds in from home, and the first one was Darth Vader. I don't know if you heard us giggle. You can hear us giggling a little bit when Jimmy first came on, and that's because we were like peeling the silicone off of the Darth Vader head ice mold for our scotch. And in this one, like, I don't know if you can see it, but it doesn't look like Baby Yoda. It looks like a small person with big ears, but it is Baby Yoda. I don't know what got us on that, but
it's all over me now.
Maybe I have an announcement to start this segment. Welcome back to Paul's Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and complete that form. We review them on a weekly basis, and hopefully we'll get them on the show. February 16th, join us to learn about validation techniques within web applications with Kevin Johnson, Josh Marpet, and myself. That one is a free webcast, no sponsors, name and email address only. March 2nd, learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys with Security Onion with myself and Doug Burks. It's really going to be Doug Burks because he knows a lot more about the Security Onion than I do. Again, these are free, non-sponsored. Name and email address is all we're asking for. securityweekly.com/webcast. Make sure you join our Discord server to join these webcasts. That's where the chat is happening. And make sure you register. You get all the handouts and resources when you register. Again, only name and email address. On to the security news. Where do we want to start? You want to start with the big headline, the big news? Start with the big news. Linux privilege escalation. I have to say, so this is what they are lovingly referring to as Pwnkit. This was discovered by Qualys researchers. Pwnkit's PK exec CVE 2021-4034. We are working on getting Wheel on the show to talk about this in detail, as Wheel and his team of researchers are responsible for not only this one, but also several other major vulnerabilities in open source software, all Linux, basically, vulnerabilities. What else about this particular vulnerability? I was trying to go through the actual code. I got as far as you've got argc, argv, right? And due to a bug in the code, if there are no arguments, the argc variable gets incremented to 1, which causes this kind of cascading effect. Again, that was kind of like as I was dissecting this, kind of as far as I got, and they walk you through that. Basically, there's a for loop that sets n to 1 that even though argc doesn't have any parameters to it, so it's interesting.
Passing a file through arguments is,
So yeah, if the argument doesn't have a variable, right, then that causes it to look down a path tree or allows you to then provide something with inside of that that is an out of bounds, essentially an out of bounds location.
Right. That was the other portion of the code, is that if you don't give it the full path, it'll actually search your path for the binary. And that had to be in the logic to exploit this particular vulnerability.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because, again, 12 years old. It goes back to almost all Linux distros, and then you start to think about like what clouds are running on, what Docker containers and Kubernetes stuff is running on, and some of the trust that we're inherently allowing this process handoff. So this is used for the some of the pseudo functions to hand cleanly organize the low privilege process communication to higher privilege processes where they need those functions. And so that seems to be a big problem for a lot of applications. If you can gain access to an application or the way to integrate this vulnerability or this proof of concept and exploit this as part of something like a longer chain, maybe get local privilege escalation as part of a log4j callback. There's a lot of things that are running on Linux that are relying on these sort of protections, and this has been here for a while. So that's a bad start to a week.
Yeah, and I mean they even found this in like ARM controllers and things like that. So you may have firmware problems down the road that there are things that are going to be more difficult to update and modify than others. So.
But I mean, that goes back to like the log4j that we've talked about before.
Exactly,
That was a library. You're talking about like PLCs or real-time operating systems that run on industrial control units, things that are in HVAC. Any of the busy box. If this is
patching PLCs is not a fun thing to do.
No, and a lot of these things are probably end of life. We're not going to get a patch because of either where they're deployed or how the manufacturer is going to do it. So it's a scary day.
I will say this is like a super easy privilege escalation. Like we talked about some of the inner workings of this vulnerability, but in execution, you can go to GitHub and you can find the code and you run it, and I mean instantaneously you are root. And it for many of us that aren't going to write the code ourselves, having access to this is like it's a really super like it doesn't require like writing. Some of the other ones that they found from this particular group required to write like huge files. Some privilege escalations are based on race conditions. This is for those out there trying to prioritize vulnerabilities.
This is just like type something on the command. I mean, the example in the article was like type something on the command line, and then who am I, and you're root, and it was like okay,
yes,
this is bad.
That is exact. I mean, I tested this on my almost up-to-date Ubuntu 20.04 system. I'm like, oh, let me see. And like I literally got the thing and hit enter, and I was like, oh, look at that. I'm root. Yeah. I'm like, I better make sure the patch actually works. So then, apt upgrade, apt update, app upgrade. And then I did it, and it said, permission. Well, I put it in Slack what the actual message was, and it didn't work. I was like, oh, okay. So it's pretty easy to fix. At least on Ubuntu, didn't require a reboot. There are workarounds to this. You can remove the set UID bit from the pkexec binary. They actually talk about that in the Qualys article, the mitigations for this vulnerability. All the way down at the end of their article, they give you the command to remove the set UID bit from pkexec, which is a temporary mitigation, which is nice to have. But you definitely want to apply the patch for this as well.
Can we go like a little higher level?
Yeah.
I mean, in that we've had how many basically tens in the last 5 or 10 months or whatever it is, or a year or whatever. So I think, is it time to do a dead pool? Like a hack pool? How many CVSS 10s are we going to have this year?
A lot.
I might have to take my shoes off to count.
Well, that's only 5. So anyway,
well, if it's both shoes, it would be 10. And
no. It takes only 5. He's lost a few fingers. Never mind. The joke. Whoosh. Okay.
Anyway.
Lee used to work in the meat packing industry, so
21 if you're in the shower. Never mind.
There you go.
My kids love that joke, by the way.
just call me Stubby.
Where are we going, honey? Before we get sidetracked.
So, I mean, we could get talk about the fact that Apple released a bunch of stuff today.
Oh, are we moving on from this? I guess there's really not much more to say. I mean,
this one. I mean,
you should definitely.
Come on, Paul, what's your prediction for the rest of the year? How many more for the rest of the year?
7.
What?
Okay.
These are 10s?
Yeah.
13.
I'll take 11. It's a nice number.
Okay. Tyler?
I think I'm going to go with 15.
Okay,
Oh, wait,
Tyler, let's be clear.
are we counting Oracle in these counts?
Okay, wait.
No.
Okay, I'm okay. Well, wait a minute.
And Tyler, let's be clear. These are ones that you have to actually release publicly, not the ones you keep in your back pocket. Okay, just be clear.
Yeah, you can't pad this thing out.
I'm going to release one just to win this now.
Yeah.
Oh wait, if we're going with how many Tyler has in his back pocket, I want to up mine to at least 27.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if we're adding Oracle and Tyler, it's a whole different animal.
This book did lurk for 12 years. It was interesting. The Dan Gooden article did summarize this probably the best about kind of the history. So in 2013, Ryan Mallon publicly reported much of the same bug and even wrote a patch, although ultimately he found no way to exploit the vulnerability. Now, I read Qualys's complete breakdown and I read Ryan's, and I mean, they were in the exact same spot, like exact same file, exact same line of code. So I'm not sure if the Qualys team saw that. It's one of my questions, for Wheel, if they had seen that as kind of an indicator for something to go after. And then Dan Gooden points out that Kevin Backhouse reported a privilege escalation vulnerability in the PK exec tracked as CVE 2021-3560. In my assessment, that's a completely different vulnerability and completely different exploit. Just happens to be in the same project, same kind of piece of code, but completely different line, right? So props to Dan for covering that very well. My question, though, is, are we now compelled, based on what I just said, are we compelled, also given the success of Pwn to Own, as Drago's kind of alluded to, that Pwn to Own isn't just about like, hey, here's a vulnerability, here's how you could exploit it. It's, no, we did exploit it, so the vendors are now compelled to fix it. Like, are we now got to make sure we weaponize all these exploits? Like, are we not kind of going on, hey, I think I found a vulnerability, here's how you might exploit it, here's sort of a proof of concept, but not really? Do you have to take it all the way through weaponization and developing an exploit before people take it seriously?
Yes. Unfortunately.
I would
Yes.
agree, Tyler.
I agree.
I don't think it is the best case for the industry and the way that we think and how I guess it's showboaty we've had to get in order to get the impact articulated properly to the proper people. Like, maybe we are getting that alert fatigue where we're finding so many bad things that they just, without demonstrating how bad this is, there's no way for us to really show the impact. And then is it worth actually releasing if you're not able to show that impact and they're not going to fix it? And that's when I would just start selling them to private equity groups. So.
Wait. But I mean, you're saying that, I mean, it's effectively FUD in a different wrapper. It's like, 100%. Oh, you don't believe me? Okay, well, screw you. Let me show you how bad it is. Click.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. In Ryan's case, he even released a patch, gave them a patch. Now, I didn't read through or go look. I don't think there was a record of the patch. If the patch actually got to them, he kind of just emailed it and didn't hear back. And I think is the story in his blog. His blog post is linked to in my story number 3. If you click in my story number 3, you can click on Ryan's blog post in there. He even wrote a patch. He made a tweet about his patch, or they linked to the tweet. Okay, so in this one, in Ryan's article, he does say, I think he does say he sent them a patch, but it's unclear as what happened with that patch.
I think this is the.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, this is interesting where you are starting to see a lot of security researchers and even people disclosing bugs starting to, SHA a message for a WordPad and dump that on something public like Twitter so that they can, get credit for it later or, mention things without having to disclose information as, whether or not the company's going to responsibly fix it or they're just going to have to drop it. So I think that actually may become, where bug bounties aren't effective and the Twitter fame may not be worth it for some researchers, but they do want the credit for the original. I think we might start seeing more and more of that hashing or even I dare say it, maybe we need a blockchain for vulnerability.
NFT.
exploit NFTs.
Next-gen NFT. Come
I
on.
like that idea. That would be cool. You could have an
That's a
exploit
great
NFT, yeah, and then you can verify that you did that. You were the one that found it.
Well, wait. Can we do old ones? Because like I will buy MSO8067 and gift it to Mubix. Mubix used to have the cake for MSO8067. Like every year, it was awesome.
Well, if it's an NFT, of course, yeah, you could buy it, trade it. You could say, I found it, but I'm willing to sell it to you. You can take credit for it if you want to pay me enough money.
I didn't find it. I just want to give it to Mubix for the cake. Like,
I
he gave me
understand
cake for
you're
years.
being a crusader, but I'm being like, really nasty.
But I think there's different levels of credit, and I don't want to take away credit, but I think there's a different level of credit if you actually compelled someone to make the fix. I think it's shameful that in this case, like Ryan pointed out this vulnerability and nobody fixed it, right? Maybe it wasn't fully understood at that time as to the impact, but like to me, it was a bug that should have been fixed. Maybe they didn't fully understand the bug. They didn't understand.
I don't think he articulated it well though either. Like he labeled it like silly arg bones, right? Like it wasn't the full impact of what he had there was not actually articulated in a meaningful way. And again, that goes back to like, do we need to call out the FUD to get this in a place that it gets the publicity that it needs? I don't know.
Do we need like more of a disclosed IO kind of like rallying cry? Like
need pen testers to show impact? Yeah,
something.
I mean,
somewhere where like. But I mean, all right. Let's put it. I don't want to pick on Ryan certainly because I don't know Ryan, and I read his post and I thought it was really good. So I don't want to take anything away from Ryan. But could it be? And I put ourselves in that situation too. Like, hey, I spent some time on this. Like, it was kind of fun. Like, there might be something there, and like I'll move on to the next thing. Does there need to be a repository for these kind of things, right? Where it's kind of maybe just the tip of the iceberg, but many of us don't want to like dig in and just see how deep like that ice goes beneath the water, but maybe someone else does. Now, to Brian's credit, he did put it out there publicly on the internet. So, that's one step, but there just to be like more of a funnel for these things to go to. And how do you filter that funnel? I don't know.
So just to go back for a quick step. So on the Discord, Adrian Sanabria has been giving us some interesting information. Apparently, there's been some predictive forecasting about 0 days being exploited in the wild. And so for the rest of the year, how many in the wild 0 days will we observe in 2022? The prediction is somewhere between 28.59 and 74.24.
Damn.
That's a big spread.
Well, there were 57 in 2021.
Okay.
That's not all like, monsters.
Well, yeah, that's not all 10.
Like solar
so
ones.
that's probably includes the 9s and the 8 7s and all those.
Well, there's lots of 10s that never get used.
No, I know there are.
So what his metric was actual 0 days being actually exploited in the wild. That's it. So 57 in 2021.
Really scary.
Most of which were probably small.
Yeah. But I do think that's what it takes to get action from a lot of people, because I know if I take it to my boss and I go, look, there was this thing in the software and we ought to fix it. This guy found a hole. The next question is going to be, is it actually causing anything? I mean, they're going to, before they allocate resources to it, they're going to want to know, is it really a threat? And that's why I think you end up with this, it has to go somewhere before people actually do anything about it.
And Tyler asked a great question, what if you have like 5 level 3 vulns, but you can chain them together and cause a level 10 impact, right, Tyler?
That's a whole new rating system, right?
I mean, that's how ratings should work, but again, that's qualitative and not quantitative, so it's very, very difficult to put metrics and show impact and show improvements. So all those are things that pen tests try to do, but again, we go back to CVSS scores. If you're not leveraging exploits or using CVEs for things, then how do you quantify the impact of something like a single jump print spooler on a domain controller that leads to full domain compromise? Like, no code was executed, nothing was needed other than Active Directory access, and that all of a sudden should be a exploit that's a 10, but is kind of buried in the news somewhere.
I also think it's difficult for the project maintainers to understand the severity and impact of either one bug or lower severity bugs that could be chained together. They're just not often operating in that mindset, and I can't say that I blame them. They're working on building, right? Not threat modeling.
And that's where the attacker mindset is often different, even for operations, right? Like operations is very focused on like, hey, I know what good security is. I know I have security configuration issues. I even might know that there's a vulnerability with the way I've configured this, or a finding. However, they do not understand the business impact or the operational impact to an attacker gaining that, and how they may chain that together and do interesting or creative things on their network to gain access to a PCI environment that then takes them out of compliance, or drop a firewall that then opens up an entire environment for ICS. Like, those are things that operations is very focused on, very individualized things, but they don't see the chained impact or the effect of what an attacker's mind is actually processing as they're exploiting these.
We had that same problem back in disaster recovery stuff, because it was really hard for people to, they wanted to go, well, what's the chance of a fire? Okay, well, that they could fathom that. But when you start talking about, well, first there's this windstorm that causes these windows to break, and then when those windows break and water comes in the window, and then the water leaks into the basement, and all that big long chain of events was really hard to get people to get their heads around. And you immediately got the pushback of, yeah, but what's the likelihood of all that happening? And and
ask a firefighter.
But then if it did, then they immediately were like, why didn't you tell us about this?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the email in which I told you about it 14 times every year. I listed out all the potential risks to the organization based on a business impact assessment and risk profile and threat modeling, and where you said, nah, we're good every single time.
Mm-hmm.
How pen testing is like a firefighter. That is an interesting correlation.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, actually, you want to talk about it sometime? I was a firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
It's like okay, so where I was a firefighter, we had a small town, large, like 30 square miles, but the town itself was not that big. And this small town had over 300 calls per year, most of which were nothing. We only got about 2 structure fires a year, but I'll tell you what, they were fun for us, but sucky for the homeowner.
Mm-hmm. Next story. Cybersecurity is good segue to what we're talking about now. Cybersecurity is broken. How we got here and how to start fixing it. I kind of ignored the how we start fixing it kind of thing. Job security maybe. But the author says that so to write an article that says cybersecurity is broken, you got to present some evidence that says how it's broken. Now, I don't disagree that we've got some stuff to fix, but I kind of just want to play devil's advocate about the things that called out, mostly because I think it's fun. I'm not trying to discredit the author or the article or whatever. I'm really just using this as a discussion point. I just want to throw that out there as well. I'm not trying to poke fun at anyone or discredit anyone. So the article states, by the end of the third quarter, the number of data breaches was 17% higher in 2021 than the previous year. The manufacturing and utility sectors were affected the most. Healthcare saw 40 million patient records breached, which was higher than previous years. Ransomware attacks have earned an estimated 590 million in the first half of 21, which was already surpassed by 2020's total estimate of earnings of 416 million. Right? So my whole devil's advocate, hold on. We can throw on statistics to say cybersecurity is broken, but could it be that we've just got better at detecting breaches, and that's why we're seeing more breaches? Or because you're breached now because attackers are using, I'll put the term extortion out there, more than just ransomware. So you're breached when an attacker is,
and you have no choice but to report it, because when it was this little back office thing went on, and I assure you they did not want that going out in the press.
Right.
But when you're just down and people are like, why can't I board my plane? And they're like, yeah, we got ransomware. It's over. There's more evidence, I think, out there that this is going on.
Also, are more patient records breached because our records are more than ever before stored digitally?
Yes.
Versus analog. Also, ransomware payouts have increased, maybe due to cyber insurance and or breach reporting laws, as you were alluding to. I think not everything, especially when we talk about statistics, are due to failures in our ability to defend networks. Like, there's other factors at play.
I'll throw one more in there and say that there are probably more and better educated attackers than ever before. Because
they can make money more.
Go back and when I was doing this stuff in college, there was no data, there was no website, there was no nothing. But today,
everything is a website, everything is stored digitally.
Yeah, and there's a huge repository of knowledge about all these kind of things. So if I want to become a skilled attacker, I really have a path.
I think Tyler wants to play devil's advocate. My devil's advocate. Tyler's shaking his head. Shaking his head at me.
No, I mean, and a place to report and a place to practice it. And you got Twitch streams with, hates handles out there just hitting all these hack the box challenges. Like, you've got all kinds of places to practice this. But you've also got the thing that I think other people don't quite take into account is the general population's, I wouldn't say really understanding, but their awareness of what cybersecurity is, what attackers are, what computers and exploits and vulnerabilities are, and the abuse of mass media networks to hypersensitize and hype those up for general consumption in the general population. Before, they're not going to go write an article or do a show on it because the general population had no understanding and that wasn't their audience. Now the audience knows those things and they can use those for the latest hype, and so mass media is now latched onto that, and it provides them stories for who's breached next. And in fact, entire reading columns of CISOs or directors or people who manage information security, those people are now digesters of a new set of information from mass media. So I think we also have to take into account that reporting and hype from some of those things that then hyper-awares or hypersensitizes us to the things happening, that we're reading about and taking metrics on now.
But at some point, doesn't the general populace just get to it's so much, I'm rolling my eyes. I mean, the CISOs are paying attention, we're paying attention, but we've got this, just this inundation of continuous cyber attacks, successful ones that I'm thinking the average person is going to stop caring, is just going to filter it out because it's just like, it becomes noise and signal.
Maybe we need like Lulzsec again. How's that for a segue?
Wow, that was pretty good and a reach at the same time.
Right? I felt the same way about it, actually, Tyler. There was an article 10 years later. What did Lulzsec mean for cybersecurity? I mean, those were the days, right? 10 years ago.
It was a lot easier life. Like, it was almost more fun back then.
Yeah, like it's scary because it's almost gotten to be more critical for society, for the world as a whole, to be more secure. I think, as Doug and I were saying, right? Like, everything is stored digitally. Everyone uses the internet. Everyone uses a smartphone now. So these things are becoming more and more important, that we are able to do things securely, but obviously that doesn't always happen. Whereas 10 plus years ago, it was for some, it was for the laws, right? We're like, it's kind of, 51 days of vulnerabilities, yay.
It's like the drugs at Woodstock versus Coney Island now. Like, drugs were fun, were cool, they were very creative back then, and now you've got Coney Island.
Now you got fentanyl and people just die instantly.
Yeah.
There was a comment in this article I thought was kind of interesting. They say, because there is no predictability, perhaps that's part of their point. There is the idea that they can hit anyone at any time for whatever reason. That seems to be what they're actually trying to show, that they are not restricted to one ideology or cause. That was kind of Lulzsec kind of mantra, right? But I think in the past 10 years, what's really changed is, we can do this just to like show how dangerous it is to do this and to like make it fun and embarrass people. But now, like, wait a minute, if attackers are going to do this, we're going to make some money at it, and it's a business and there's structure, and that's been, I think, one of the biggest changes.
You don't want to do that for lulz anymore anyway, because back then you could do some of this and get away with it and not have an indictment, have the FBI chroma that, but it was a little less risk.
Did. All you had to do to get out of it was rat and all your friends, like, say boo.
Yeah.
And you might get a good job out of it too. Remember when they were hiring all the successful hackers?
Mm-hmm.
I just think the damage has become more accessible by the general public. People understand the idea of ransomware.
Mm-hmm.
This cost me money, but when you were doing really weird esoteric things, even if they were simple esoteric things, it was back in that nerds being nerds kind of world that was always around, and all of a sudden it's like general public people go, that cost $100 million, we need to hurt these guys.
Yeah, I think it's more tangible now. Like, even when Lulzsec went after Sony and exposed a bunch of stuff, right? Everyone was like, "Oh, well, that's really bad." But now when we see a ransomware, it's like, "Oh, a hospital went down and people died." And not only that, I mean, that's the worst thing, one of the worst things, if not the worst thing that could happen. But now there's a financial responsibility, not just to clean up the breach, but I had to pay the attackers for this ransom. And even if I do pay them, I'm still ransomware sometimes. It's more tangible now.
Well,
I don't know how much the general
one of the first times I ever consulted with somebody on something that I think the upper management people started feeling the sort of hurt was it was a breach and it was stupid. And they lost all these employee records, and they were trying to figure out how to avoid lawsuits from employees who were getting their bank accounts and stuff cleaned out because they lost bank account records, social security numbers, and all this stuff. And, they're basically telling their employees, well, here's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to get new bank account numbers, new social security numbers. You're going to need to reset every password you've ever had in your whole life. You're going to have to go to your home records. And the employees were going, so when am I going to do this? You're going to give me vacation days for this, or what are you going to do? And this company was starting to say, wow, this is going to cost us a fortune. And they actually immediately started they first called law enforcement, who went, my what? It was a pretty funny phone call to listen in on because, they're calling the West Jesus County Sheriff's Office going, we think we lost a lot of data records, and we think it was this guy named Bert. And they're literally going, a what? Did he kill anybody? Was he drunk? No, he breached data from hard drives. And they're like, is that some kind of pre-version? Kind of stuff. This guy didn't know what a hard drive was. And the company was really thinking about how much money this was going to cost them. And I think that started to set in their head that maybe there was something to this rather than it's just a bunch of nerds being nerds and, messing with each other and all this kind of nonsense. And that was a while ago, but yeah.
Well, realize that even today, if you call the FBI because somebody stole records and, for whatever reason, cybercrime of any sort, if it's under $100,000, they're going to refer you to the IC3, Internet Crime Consortium, whatever it is, Cybercrime Center, Internet Cybercrime Center. And they're going to take a report, and that's it. And if it's over $100,000 and below $500,000, they'll have an agent ask you some questions, and that's it. And if it's over $500,000, they may actually assign somebody to look into it.
And son, if you can't hunt it down with a bloodhound, we don't want nothing to do with it. Have a nice day.
That's pretty much it. So, West Jesus or FBI, it doesn't really matter.
Pretty much.
It sucks.
Mm-hmm. What does Linux mean?
What's that, Lee?
Called West Jesus today, they probably would know what a computer was and what a hard drive was. But they might not get a higher level of service.
But they probably still couldn't do anything about your data breach.
Right. But at least they wouldn't be like, is that something?
No, I'm sure. And like I say, Rhode Island has a great computer crimes unit. And if you called them with the data breach, they would at least know what it was. They may be able going, well, we don't really have any jurisdiction in East Jesus. We just have jurisdiction in West Jesus. So, you might want to call East Jesus.
There's a lot more places you can call now. You can call the FBI. You can, even if Josh's comment notwithstanding, you can call them. You can call CIA. It's not just a.
And that's different than Lulzsec, where they really didn't know what to do about any of that, and it was just considered this weird esoterica. Whereas today, they might actually be able to conduct an investigation, and if it was somebody that they had access to, they might well go arrest them. But, whew.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about, Lee, your story number 8. Sorry for the abrupt kind of pivot, but hackers say they encrypted the Belarusian railway servers in protest. I haven't followed the story as closely as possible. I've heard some things that this ties into the Russian and Ukrainian situation, that the railway is somehow part of this.
Yes, they're staging the troops going through. The Russian troops are staging in order to do that quickly. They're going through the Belarusian government, which Lulzsec, the Belarusian president, has had a lot of opponents and has close ties to the Kremlin, and is a proponent to some of that. But there's a pretty big argument.
Belarus never really fully kind of separated from Mother Russia.
They have, and certain parties are very, very anti-Russian, but there are parties, and the current president and regime has some very close ties and is very pro-Russian as opposed to some of the other ones. And that's causing serious discrepancies between Ukraine and Belarus. And
so the railway runs through Belarus for the Russians to get troops to the Ukrainian border.
Yep. And so they hack that. They have the ability, they set off some alarms. They've demonstrated this. And they think this may be the same group that released a bunch of stuff to embarrass the president back in 2020, as well as some IT or hacker experts back in 2016. It's kind of all the same group. They think that's the same group, and they're able to essentially shut down. They didn't want to do it to avoid causing life or loss of harm. They're very, very kind of ethical. If you can get past some of the language barrier, there's some really good notes in how they're going about doing this, but they have
Ukrainian hackers are hacking the railway.
No, these are Belarusian hackers.
They're Belarusian hackers.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
they're hacktivists, and they basically did this, and then they started demanding that Lulzsec release some political prisoners and that they stop supporting the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. So they're using ransomware and other tactics as a hacktivist kind of action in.
They don't want to train go off the rails.
They had a whole bunch of stuff on there about how we're not going to do this and we're not going to do this because we don't want anybody to get hurt. And we're going to, but we're going to cause disruption because we want to basically get the president to back off the position.
Interesting.
Their primary target is that president. That's who they want. That's who they're picking at.
So speaking of Ukraine and Russia, did you guys see the buzzer station thing? I forgot to add it to the list. I'm terribly sorry, but there's a buzzer station, a number station. You guys know number stations?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
So there's a number station, UVB76, and it looks like it might have gotten hacked. I will throw something in Slack.
Where is this number station?
It's in Russia.
Okay.
It's a Russian number station. If you click that link, they actually put a Guy Fawkes mask in the stereogram from the station the other day. They've also put their Telegram station or Telegram channel on there. They've basically, pirates have overrun the frequency. It's kind of cool. I'll throw it in.
I love number
well.
stations are the coolest thing ever. I love those things.
Do you think it's like a covert communication channel for the Russians and they're disrupting it?
A lot of them, nobody knows what they are. They're just these weird signals. My friend Lou we had his ham radio and we used to tune them in, and they're just like these things that read off numbers, and you don't know what the numbers are. They're just like,
remember Red Dawn? The chair is against the wall.
And there's stuff like that too. But there actually are stations that just literally read off numbers like 7, 35, 14, 9, 11.
Yeah, I've read about it.
And you're like, what the hell is this?
You know the one-time pad code for that time and date that you have.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure some of them are that. Some of them are probably just weird trolls, that want to put up something to freak people out, because it freaked me out the first time Lou was like, what do you think these are? And he was like showing them to me, and I was like, okay, I don't know what the hell that is, but it's pretty cool.
Cue in the X-Files theme song.
Oh,
that is kind of cool.
Yeah, this war is going to be interesting because of the ability of both sides and who the allies are between the two countries, and the misattribution that's going to have to happen or may not end up happening. The cyber side of this war plays a huge role in, obviously we see even in troop stage up before the war, but once this kind of hits the fan, they've been running tests against each other for a very long time, and there's a lot of stuff that can go down that can cause, a bad day for the rest of the world.
We're all getting drafted
into the cyber war.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
100%.
One of my questions on the cyber war side is it really going to be limited to the primary combatants, or will everybody be jumping on one way or
Oh,
another?
what the hell? Everybody get on. It's like,
Just chaos.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot like, I think, one of those CCDC capture the flag competitions where you get a team that just is all out, like all the scripts YOLOing, and these poor blue teamers are just trying to figure out what the hell just happened to their 10 machines.
if they'll stream it on Twitch, I know we'll watch.
Are you saying the Ukrainians are the poor blue team that has the 10 machines?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
think they're pretty outgunned. They're pretty outnumbered from both a capability, but they do have a lot of allies.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether or not the backbone of the allies is able to withstand or make enough of a difference to stop a very determined adversary with
What will Joe Byron do? Bing bong.
Bing bong.
Gosh. There's a couple there was a couple Apple vulnerabilities. There was a McAfee vulnerability that was actually really, really cool. Pick any of
what
those.
Was the McAfee? I saw the McAfee one. I didn't add it to my stories though.
Yeah, the McAfee one has the agent for EOP. It has a bug with inside of the OpenSSL.
Wait, EOP or EPO? Enterprise,
EPO, sorry, EPO.
Enterprise Policy Orchestrator, right? Yeah.
Yep. So you can essentially leverage a config file for OpenSSL, dumping it in a certain path location that EPO parses, and I believe it has the ability to do privilege escalation to system with that OpenSSL config file.
Is that like a command injection or something different? I did see that briefly.
I think it's probably close to a file injection with a path vulnerability, because it's essentially reading in a path from a config file that then parses it to do something, and I think it executes something from there. So there's a couple steps to it. It wasn't real clear how they did it, but I have an idea because we did something similar with the DLL hijack for a similar product that they have. So they've got that one, and they've got some arbitrary shellcode injection for another one of their products, and I believe a DLL hijack for another one. There was like 3 security bugs there.
And what was the Apple one was pretty epic.
Yeah, the Safari one. Well, so there was a bunch actually. Like looking through what they fixed in iOS 15.3 and iPad 15.3, I didn't realize a few of these. There was a lot of things that got put into here for CVEs. You look through the list of CVEs, and you've got logic issues. You've got
kernel
use after free. You've got some kernel stuff, arbitrary code execution at the kernel level. And these were in multiple products. So I haven't. The Safari one. Very specific.
You touch WebKit, you touch a bunch of product.
Yep.
There was a issue with the new feature. One of the new features they were putting in WebKit, one of their databases, that you had an information leak problem that they just got the patch out for. They had a disclosure on it, 3-4 months ago, and the downside on the Apple platform, particularly the mobile, is although there are different browsers, they still all sit on top of WebKit. So no matter what you're using, whether you're using their Safari or Chrome or Firefox on your Apple device, it was still WebKit under the covers. So you are all vulnerable, which was kind of annoying, but this fix takes care of that. And yeah, so if you've got a Mac, the OS has been updated, whether you're running 14, 15, 11, or 12, or not 14. tvOS, watchOS, they all got hit.
There was also the Safari one, right? The $100,000 payout one that was the Safari Universal Cross-Site Scripting one that gave an attacker access to the user account and the webcam. Which
again, I saw that one. I did see that one.
I feel like Safari is Apple's Internet Explorer, and at some point they're just going to give up and build in a Chromium browser.
Yeah. Yep. Have you guys been playing around with Brave? Have you guys used Brave? Yeah. I like Brave a lot. I just started playing around with it this week. I was behind the curve.
Yeah.
It's built. How do you like its built-in ad blocker?
It's not bad.
It's pretty nice,
I thought it worked pretty well. Yeah.
It was. Is that Chromium-based Brave browser?
Yeah, it's Chromium-based.
That's the back-end engine, I think.
Yeah.
As is Edge. Basically anything that's good now is Chromium based.
Right.
Edge is all Chromium based.
I think Brave's performance is pretty good too.
It is not Chrome.
And it's not, right?
I read it some, and I mean, it's definitely not Chrome, and it was definitely faster and lighter.
It runs Chrome extensions.
It does, but it's like it's not got all this overhead bloat that's been built into Chrome over the last 10 years. That's made Chrome this big clunky hog that is worthy of the Microsoft name. It's like,
most of Chrome's extensions should run on a Chromium based unless there's security implications of how that extension is interacting at the
Gotcha.
all your basic stuff works. It's just if you get into like sophisticated things, they may not work the same way. But yeah, it's a nice
Yeah, I bet I'm slowly starting to switch to that this week.
How about those Apple AirTags that are used to find secret military
Yeah. This is, leaking location data again, right?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't new. There's been a few ways to do this, but yeah.
Yeah, I wrote an alert about those because there was all kinds of reports on that stuff for the last couple of weeks. There was a study about the ones where they were dropping them in people's pockets at clubs and things and following them home and finding out where they lived and all kinds of stuff like that.
I've seen like stupid YouTube videos about that too, where people are dropping these AirTags.
It was
and,
pretty
like,
scary. It was actually scary.
And,
I saw a report about it, and it made me like start thinking about how that might be something that people would use to find what's going on inside of a building or something. So if you could see some employees from company Y and they're down there having lunch, and you drop that in one of their their backpacks or something, go, well, those guys are server techs. I was listening to them at lunch. I know where the server room is now, and I've mapped the whole building out by looking at these air tags that I've planted on people going in the building. And
the AirTags are super scary too, because not like the tiles where you're within range or you've got to count on the pinging ability of a phone that's been connected to, right? These Apple products are leveraging any iPhone within vicinity to basically relay pingbacks. It's a chained peer Tor node in order to get location data back. That's kind of scary in and of itself for how it's doing it, for one. And for two, that makes it very, very residual and redundant as far as its capabilities in areas that are going to have a hard time to get something else that is a little bit more difficult to do tracking, something bigger that has an LTE card in it, or something that's got full Wi-Fi. Like, all those things are a little bit harder. This is leveraging everybody's phone in their stupid pocket and providing very accurate location data. That's kind of spooky.
Yeah, they've like mainstreamed this idea that you can just chip anything or anyone.
Yep.
Chip anything and peer it off of anybody.
It does have an alarm.
The Alexa Wi-Fi kind of.
If it doesn't come into contact with the owner within so many hours, it does start alarming. So you would actually.
I know, because my wife put them on all of our dogs.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, all of our dogs start beeping.
They start beeping if they aren't with contact.
Yeah, I think it was like 5 hours or something. If it had not come into contact with the owner within 5 hours, it actually starts setting off an alarm, so you would hear it playing or something.
But the location's still beaming off of whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the data's still there. It's just you might suddenly be clued in that you've had an AirTag stuffed in your pocket or something.
Bet we could reverse that and turn that off, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of. We haven't really covered a lot of the AirTag stuff, but yeah, there's people that have done full teardowns of them and stuff. Tyler.
I mean, people are pissed off about Google tracking them still. Apparently, U.S. are just going to start suing, and they don't realize that this has been happening.
Now you have to wear a full body Faraday suit just to go out to a club.
Well, I mean, we've known this, but it's
an unknown AirTag, but I don't think it works. It's supposed to go off when it says, "I got this AirTag near you," and it's not joined to me. What the hell's going on? Supposed to be there.
The Google thing and its ability, like these states that are going to try and sue Google for this location that even if you opt out, it still tracks your location. This is something that, like, we've been speaking about forever. Like, this is not just Google, and these guys are kind of putting effort in the wrong places. You got ad tracking data that you opted into by buying devices or visiting a website or getting a cookie. You've got mobile data that your providers are providing locations on for these ad tracking stations. You've got applications that are running in the browser or applications on your phone that are tracking your location, or just ad tracking and sending that back and picking up Wi-Fi hotspots that are all mapped out and providing geolocations. So just by going after Google is probably one of the better people that have the data that use it more responsibly than, I will say, some of the others that have.
Maybe.
And
I do think we need to keep Google in check.
You do have to keep Google. ABC company is big, and they have a lot of
scary.
And that data is valuable.
I don't know. Did you listen to the latest Rogan with the doctor guy that did a bunch of the Google research? I can't remember his name. I'll look it up. But basically, he did some experiments, and I have not validated his research. But Google, I don't know.
There's a ton of people that have done like research and like done. I would say they're semi-technical, but when you actually look at like had access to some of the data, and we see what the data and how the correlations happen between systems, because we built the integrations for some of those systems, and the way that this data, like people aren't really realizing the way in which this data is tracking and the way people opt into a lot of this stuff. Like, yeah, you can say something around Google, you can get ads, all those are targeted off of voice and different things that you're purchasing habits. You got spreadsheets and spreadsheets of any call you've ever made, anything you've said in front of Alexa or Siri. All those things exist. It is the scary pieces that are integrated into applications and hardware that we actually sign up as part of the EULA and as part of subsidized hardware. Those correlations and the integrations between the cellular network, Wi-Fi hotspots, and ad tracking companies, ad tracking data that's being sold in consolidated brokerage firms, that's the scary stuff.
Yeah, this wasn't so much about location as it was about manipulating search results. It was Dr. Robert Epstein. Take it with a grain of salt. I haven't validated the research. And there were some cringy moments for me during this episode, certainly, where Joe was asking very good questions, and Robert Epstein was kind of like not giving the greatest answer or dodging, like, because Joe was like, so wait, how could Google take down like the whole internet? And I'm like, okay, most of us would hear that question, and then we start going through like Google controls DNS. They control the browser. Like, put that in English language so everyone can understand it. Most of us could probably do that all, off the top of our head. And he was kind of dodging that question. And it goes back to your comment, Tyler, like knows just enough to do his research. I don't want to invalidate his research or validate it because I haven't looked into it. I've only listened to the podcast. And as I've noticed listening to the guests on Rogan, like you got to do your own research on top of it. Don't get me wrong. I like Joe. I think he does a great job in that. He's a good interview and asks good questions. But some of the research from Dr. Epstein was that Google can control the search results and does so in a very specific way. And I liked the premise that he was putting forth that he would during a research study would put software on people's, thousands of people's machines, have them do Google searches, and then write software to analyze the results and go, wait a minute, in Georgia, like your search results for like election related stuff was really different from people in non-swing states like during this time. And like, if now all of us start thinking about how we would conduct that research, like, oh, that could actually be really valid research. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, I think from what he described, really pointed to like there was shenanigans going on. Like try and search for, people saying bad things about Hillary Clinton on Google versus other search engines. You're like, wait a minute.
That's known territory though.
Yeah.
That is the analytics behind a lot of the ML and AI stuff that they're doing, and those are geologically precursored for dispositions of certain geological regions, certain cities, certain current events, even certain household browsing and keywords will queue and change your search pattern, which is part of your ad tracking data, which is part of your personal consumer profile. That is your ad tracking ID. That all changes per individual user by geolocation 100%. And that's all built into the analytics. That's the engine itself. That's what it's designed to do. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing mysterious there. That is how Google does it.
There's other research that's like, and you just think about this. If we had to influence an election and you were Google and you wanted either party to win, okay, on or around election day, tell everyone from the party that you want to win, send them an alert that says go out and vote, right? And like I think this is an issue.
Do you know like the level and the ability from a not just a code standpoint but a technological standpoint to control the amount of data and the back-end engine of how Google search analytics works for, say, the whole population, or just to swing an election, just for that example. There are enough controls and there is enough.
No, I agree, Todd. I completely agree. My statement was attempt to influence or influence an election, right? Not rig an election, right? We got to separate rigging an election. Yeah,
it's just about information.
Yeah,
and that's not the same thing as manipulating a vote.
I completely agree.
You're manipulating the people who vote. You're not manipulating the vote itself.
Absolutely.
Right.
But is that manipulation based on your opt-in for what you would choose to see based on your personality? Like, that's Google serving you what you want to see based on what they think you know. So it's not necessarily that Google is. People look at it as a white and black. Like, if I put this in, I should get the same result as Johnny gets when he puts the exact same thing in. It will never ever be that way because the engine is not designed like that. But we know that Russia used a ton of ad and SEO tactics. In fact, China did the same thing. They just didn't do it as well, or maybe they did it more subtle and they did it better. But the election was 100% like from a news standpoint and like what you could search and the information you were getting. The SEO for all of those sites and even the stuff that Google had to go and recap for congressional hearings, that was 100% manipulated. But is that manipulation, or is that people knowing how to abuse an engine because of SEO and their ability to create information very quick? That's disinformation.
Yeah, it's influence and suggestion, and I think what I'm advocating for is awareness about it, and perhaps regulation that needs to put a cap on some of this stuff as well, because otherwise what you end up with is something that I've been saying for years and years and years on this podcast, right? Is I don't want big tech to run the world, because big tech only cares about big tech, right? And I agree. It's too late. I mean, a sitting president was deplatformed from social media. Like, if that's not saying we've lost to big tech, I don't know what is. Whether you agree with the reasons or not, like that's not the argument. Like, that's the control and power that they have, I think, has already exceeded my threshold from what I'm comfortable with. In other words,
and I think some of that is cybersecurity, though, right? Like, absolutely. Big tech has gotten money and funding because government has funded them in order to be the next, or have a cyber capability in order to defend and or have offensive capability against the next platform in war, which it was cybersecurity. So all these tech companies now have more money than government, employ the smartest people in the world, and are now the majority holders for any decision making in the country. Yet, but we lost that.
And they're the largest donors to the government too. So they can they have so much money, they can pour it right back into the government, and which is of course lobbying. And we've seen that before with the oil industry and the tobacco industry and probably the cotton industry and everything else. And now it's the tech industry that's pouring money in there and saying.
They alluded to in Eisenhower's speech that he predicted that we would lose to technology. We would lose to big companies. That. Yeah.
So you may end up in William Gibson's world of where the tech companies control everything.
Right. But that's a lot of science fiction. I mean, look at Blade Runner. You look at a lot of science fiction works. They're all been. But
Gibson did such a good job of describing it, where everybody's allegiant to something. Mm-hmm. So now instead of a government, you have Google, and Google provides your health care and all these kind of things. And that was one of his big themes, was that there's these little bubbles of technology, and they, you have to sign on and be a Sarariman with whomever. And if you don't, then you're just left out in the cold, and you won't be able to, if you say I will support Google and they cut you off,
now you're a Ronin.
You're a Ronin.
You remember the President's Analyst movie?
No.
The which movie?
Was TPC the phone company? Was everybody plugged in that worked for the phone company for one phone company goal?
I don't remember that. What is the name of that movie?
James Coburn.
James Coburn. Okay.
President's Analyst.
Huh.
And the bad guys in the movie were the phone company.
Weird. I don't think I've seen that. That's bizarre.
So anyway, sorry for the non sequitur.
Well, now I got something to do tonight.
Yeah. People, I hear a lot of talk about, foreign governments influencing elections. Don't forget, we're also got people influencing us because they want their candidate to win. It's not because they're evil or whatever, but they're influencing the media and everything else, every tool available. So, healthy skepticism, multi-sources.
Then you have the X factor that you just don't know when you end up with like celebrities or I'm not going to call them dumb because they may be intelligent people, but people that are, TikTok famous, YouTube famous, whatever, stream famous, have the ability to swing or get large groups of people just by saying something in one sense or another on one platform or another. And that's the X factor that you just never know when that's going to make a difference. Maybe Kanye West decides to run for president and all of a sudden you get enough platforms that have said, okay, let's go do that. Like, that's when it's a little bit, it's even more scary when you have that X factor of uncontrolled variables that don't make as much sense.
Yeah.
It's idiocracy.
Yeah, for sure. It is. I didn't think that was a prediction. We hoped it wasn't.
We thought it was entertainment, but it was actually
funny.
A documentary.
Oh, God. I do want to talk about, because I really, people that are really smart, I really admire their brilliance. The best cybersecurity research paper revealed. In just what struck me about this paper, so this was chosen by, I forget, the Institute, maybe that was published, the winning paper was published at the 2020 IEEE Symposium on Foundations of Computer Science. And so the winning paper was titled One-Way Functions in Kolmogorov, thank you, Complexity. And their description of one-way hash functions is my favorite description of one-way hash functions. Because if you search one-way hash functions, you can get like the more English description of one-way hash functions, but like this paper, it's like the academic description of one-way hash functions, which I love it. I'm going to read it. A one-way hash function is a function f that can be efficiently computed in polynomial time, yet no probabilistic polynomial time algorithm can invert f with the inverse polynomial probability for infinitely many input lengths, or n.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
There you have it.
And it's just, wow, someone wrote that. I was like, wow, that is amazing. You got to go read the paper. You're going to have to read that sentence about 18 times for people that are smart can probably read that way less than I had to read it to like fully like comprehend and compute that in my own brain. But I'm like, that was amazing. That was amazing. That was from the winning paper. But that's a really, I mean, again, you're just hearing it or like reading it fast, right? It sounds like your brain has a tough time comprehending it. It's meant to be read and understood. I was like, wow, that's really, now I know why the paper won. Like just in that one sentence, I'm like, that's really cool. Yeah. And the whole paper is kind of very eloquently written that way, right? Like really cool. Really, I didn't read the whole paper, but I flagged it to go back because I thought it was just really cool.
Those are the days when I wish Lou wasn't sitting in a coffee can in my living room, because then I could I could call him and go, Lou, explain this to me.
Explain this in English, right?
Oh God! All right, let me get the whiteboard out.
Right. Yes. Yes.
How's your matrix algebra skills? Pretty pathetic, I bet.
He would say shit like that.
Oh,
you
yes, he would
all the time.
Well, one of the neat things about the article that's here is, NSA is saying, look, this continues what was said in 1976 by Diffie-Hellman about the key to cryptography was one-way, non-reversible hashes. And to me, it says, that's still a sound foundation.
Yep.
We've talked about it in many different ways on the shows over the years, but I just thought, hey, the language in the paper is very eloquent. But that's really what it comes down to. This is, finding ways to do a one-way function that can't be easily reversed, no matter what your linear algebra and matrix multiplication skills are, Doug. It still won't easily come back, and if possible, it'll never come back unless you, encrypt and compare, hash and compare. Excuse me.
And what you described in more English was inverse polynomial probability for infinitely many input lengths.
Try and say that.
That's really what you described in English.
Non-reversible one-way functions are good. Okay.
Yes, that's basically what it comes down to. Right. It is also astonishing to look at the works of Diffie-Hellman. And see how it is. I mean, we were just talking about NFTs right before the show, and I'm like, it's still like you trace that all the way back to Diffie-Hellman's paper, right? It's amazing.
Where's Mr. Jeff when you need him?
Right. Let's see a couple of Tyler. I had to put this one in here for you, man, because I read this headline and I thought of you.
Maybe I need to call my buddy Joe.
Right? Like
maybe you've got some insight on where to look for my jump drive to start tracking it.
A hacker recovered a crypto wallet worth $2 million for the owner who forgot their password. And I was like, oh, someone unlike Tyler that was able to get their money back or their crypto.
I want to go watch this documentary. Apparently they YouTube or did a documentary on the whole thing. And it's Joe Grand, the guy that makes oh
yeah. Yeah, he was part of Loft, man. Yeah, made all the badges. He was a Loft member, one of the original, if I recall.
Tabulator. Yeah, all the cool devices that we use for hardware hacking. Like he is the kingpin, and obviously that's what he's doing now. Which I'm gonna have to reach out and hit him up because that sounds kind of fun.
Absolutely,
sounds lucrative.
That last bit in the article about 4 million bitcoins lost due to unrecoverable or accidentally throwing hardware away, among other things, losing it.
How does that impact the price of Bitcoin specifically? I mean, since we have that, does that impact? What impact does that have? I should say, if any.
So it keeps a certain volume always static within inside of that, which is not a bad thing. Because you want a certain level of shift and you want a certain level of liquidity. But you also want a certain set of static because you can't have everyone pull out because then the value to fiat actually ends up not working out. And when it starts to fall because the block doesn't have as many ways or blocks to validate against. Or you end up with more coins and then there's an influx of people buying the coins. It could go both ways. But it does help it, I think, in the long run. But a lot of those
the fact that people have lost, what you're saying is the fact that people have essentially, air quotes, lost this Bitcoin.
Or wallets not being used, or people not needing
people
that
locked
much.
out of the wall. I mean, they're in the blockchain, but they're not accessing it, which means they're not moving it. They're not doing anything with it. It speaks to the stability. It helps the stability of the coin.
Yep, 100%. And that overall valuation inside the coins themselves. So.
Does that make you feel any better that you're helping the stability of Bitcoin, or not really? No,
not today. I could just find one of them. That's fine.
Right.
It was something similar in the 90s when Russia was coming from socialism to capitalism, or whatever they are today, when they got all these loans from the IMF, and then a bunch of kleptocrats took them out of the country, taking that money out of circulation, and the economy tanked or stagnated because the money wasn't circulating. It's the same kind of idea. Is that the bitcoins are lost, but there's a point you can't circulate it all, as Tyler said. But it can't stagnate. You can't put it all in the mattress either. You've got to have some. I don't know what the thresholds are for Bitcoin.
It's a pretty low percentage of overall block equity. So the number of coins, like 400 or even 4 million coins, is not very much in the total amount that the block is processing currently. I think it's probably something.
But if I shoved all of it, if I could shove as much as I could into a mattress, that would be pretty bad. Or if I started spending it all at the same time, dreams are bad. The values would go crazy. Anyway,
I know a lot of us work from home. And don't have to go into the office and deck out their cubicle or work in a cubicle. I know, like, raise your hand if you worked in a cubicle farm, and it can be like the Matrix is a really good representation of like the gray and bland decor that can like make you feel really bad.
Fluorescent lights
and just gray, barren cubicles, or the desert color like makes you feel you're like in
Desert.
yeah, like you're on Tatooine in Star Wars. It's just very, very desert-like, which is why when I came across this article that in the pandemic times that we live in now, not too many of us are going back in the office. A lot of people are, which I think is good. And this person decided to deck out their cubicle and turn it into a cabin. And so he wood laminated his entire cubicle, and even has like a picture with like a window overlooking a lake and a fireplace and electric fireplace and lanterns in the whole thing. I think that's whether you're at work or at home, like I think to kind of decking out your office is like a thing.
Then
right?
they bring in hot desks and everybody whoever gets there first gets to use the cabin.
Right? Yeah. Apparently, this guy liked building forts, and now his employer plans to give out $200 stipends for cubicle decor, which I think is really awesome. Right? I think that's really awesome.
It'll never work.
Yeah, it could go badly. It could go badly.
Well, the minute you do that, then somebody will come in and do something offensive, and then then somebody else will do something offensive back, and then next thing you know, you're back on Tatooine again.
Right. Well, I want to see the disco themed cubicle. I think it'd be awesome.
I like that he not only did the desk, but also those glass or whatever transparent partitions. He decorated them too. That's where you got trees and mountains. I mean, he went up as far as he could in terms of his space. And hell, that one chandelier is hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah, it's got like lanterns and like little wall sconces that they're very cabin-like. It's really cool.
It's really cool.
And you can see the rest of the cubicle. If you scroll down, the rest of the cubicles are like the Matrix style, very bland, gray, beige style cubicles, which, I mean, if anything, diminishes your soul.
Pretty much, yeah.
Bland cubicle landscape.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep. So that was pretty cool. Awesome. Any other stories you want to cover?
I'm good. Probably a wrap.
I think we're good. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Hope to see everyone next time. Over and out.